All right. Welcome to our virtual coffee with the Little Prince performer. I'm so excited to have you.
I'm so excited to be here. It's been a long road.
It has. Oh my gosh. Speaking of long road, I think that's a very good way to put it. I don't even remember when we first started talking about this project.
I feel like it was about a year ago.
I think we even talked about it when it was still going to be in person. So it must have been over a year ago because it was before COVID.
Right. You are absolutely correct.
So, anyway, at some point before this pandemic, we talked about it. And I was so excited that you immediately agreed to be on this. When I was writing the music, I thought of you because your voice was just perfect for this. So, I was so grateful to have you. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe how you approached this character and what your process was?
Yeah, absolutely. Playing men is always a little bit of a different mindset. I guess gender lines were a little bit more blurred with this particular story. It
True.
doesn't seem very, okay, this is a young boy. He's got only one thing on his mind, and how does that center around the story? So this was definitely more of a feeling of, I would say, not innocence, but he has a little bit more purity to his motive.
I
He
like.
wants to find friends, and it's a very simple and a very understandable motive. Where if you've ever grown up, lonely, or if you've ever grown up with a very small group of people, it's very easy to understand that longing, that difficulty with connecting with most of the world, and that insecurity until you find that group of people that you really do connect with
Mhm.
and finding your place.
I love how you put that. Yes, that totally encaptures who the little prince is. It's not so much about is he a boy, is he a girl? It's more he's just there and he just wants a friend. And he maybe even doesn't make it very much about himself. He just is looking for something and doesn't know what it is that he's looking for until he realizes it. And you talk about an interesting aspect because it is a pants roll, but it's also not the usual pants roll in that your movements, the way you reacted with your facial expressions, everything was just so on point. And kudos to you for doing that. Anyone that doesn't know, doing that in front of a green screen with nobody to actually look at. Do you want to talk about your green screen situation?
Okay, that's actually, oh, that's a fun story. At the time, I was living with Michael Segura, one of the other actors in this lovely opera, and we had a setup in our living room in order to get the green screen flat, so to say. So we actually had to construct a place for this to go because we don't have any like vast expanse of wall that we
Mhm.
can just put this up against. So in the middle of our living room, we had an office chair with a lap tray on top of it, which had a music stand standing on top of it, atop which we put my staff that we taped the green screen to on either end. There's just this construction in the middle of our living room. We had to take it down in order for people to enter and leave the apartment. So that was a very interesting experience in and of itself, as you have to get really creative with the surfaces that you are filming on.
It was an adventure for sure.
The entire experience was so different.
Mhm.
I mean, it's such a strange time that we live in. You really just have to get creative with whatever means you have at the moment. And the fact that we had moved it up a semester really provided that necessity of, okay, we have to get this done. It has to look good. Let's figure out some ways to do that.
Yeah, and it honestly, I mentioned this before, but maybe this was needed for that last little touch of magic. This is such a unique story, and I think the way that we told it is unique for its time and very, very telling of its time too.
Oh, I agree. I love the fact that we got to incorporate things like the backgrounds and the transitions and
Mhm.
those animations, because they're done so wonderfully. Like those volcanoes, I love the steam coming out of them. It looks fantastic. So I agree. I think it adds a little bit of whimsy.
For sure, whimsy is such a good word. It's a whimsical story. I feel like also even the story arch kind of was ever so much more poignant during this time. As I was editing it, it dawned on me how much this story relates to this time of realizing what really matters, the connections that we have, looking for that connection, not being able to see anyone in person, not being able to perform in person,
Mhm.
and then having that journey of a character that's looking for pretty much the same thing and has to come to the conclusion that what's most important is invisible. It's those people that we have in our lives. And
Right. It's the connections that we hold so dear, those things that can persevere over a computer screen.
yeah, exactly. How has this time affected you as a performer? I know you had graduated already and you were out performing as a singer, and then COVID happened.
Uh, well, it was a disappointment to say the least. So when COVID first started, I was actually employed in 5 different jobs. So I was out teaching at a school. I was a private coach. I was working for Pacific Corral. There were a couple other things which I can't remember quite at the moment. But I was successfully making ends meet just as a musician, which I am so proud of myself for being able to do straight out of college.
Yes.
And not everyone has the opportunity and the means to do that. And I was thrilled that I was able to do that and had right time, right place in my favor. And then COVID hit. And admittedly, I think something that's not necessarily talked about as much in regards to the pandemic and being a musician is, we talk about all the disappointment that surrounds it and grieving the performances that never happened, and not being able to see our friends and not being able to make music in the same way. But I think something that we don't necessarily talk about all the time is the fact that it gave all of us a break.
Hmm.
So I didn't realize how much of a break I needed until it was forced upon me. And being able to step back and take that break actually allowed me to come back even stronger and really cement the
Mm.
fact that I love what I do.
Mm, that's beautiful.
So it's really allowed me to get a new appreciation for the fact that I have had the opportunity and the ability to choose a career that is something that I am both able to do and that I love to do.
Hmm.
And I can't wait to get back to it.
I can't wait to hear you back at it, honestly. That's, thank you for sharing that. That's a very good point of that we don't talk about. It was a break, and I think for many of us it showed us just how much we put on our plate. And
Mhm,
that's normal. I hope that we don't just go back to that and that we learn from that. Time with family that we got that we didn't have before. Just saying, you know what, I need a break. We're just going to watch a movie.
mhm.
That was unheard of before.
I agree. I actually really like that idea of taking the moment to assess before just jumping back into what was considered normal instead of normal. The status quo shouldn't always be the status quo, I guess is the best way to put it. We have to reassess and decide what's actually good for us as individuals and us as a society, and being able to step back from all of that in a way has allowed us the ability to look at all this and say, okay, what do I want to keep?
You just put something very important, the differentiation or separation of the individual from the society,
Mhm.
where, yes, we may have a status quo, but if the status quo is not serving the individual, then
Mhm.
that's a status quo that we need to question and put the individual first again. That's,
Absolutely.
yeah. What do you have lined up? Is there anything? I know we're still kind of going through it. Things are opening up with the vaccines, and I think you got your second vaccine already.
Actually, I just got my first one this past weekend.
First one.
So once I'm up and running with the second one, I think I'm going to be a little bit more willing to start putting things back on my plate. But at the moment, I'm working through the arias that I have had kind of stockpiled for a while.
Mm.
I'm actually working on my competition rep.
Oh, exciting.
So nothing is quite 100% ready to go yet, but I will say there's a lot of stuff that I've been working on for the last year that
Mm-hmm.
are, when you ask someone like, what was your dream role?
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on getting those in shape. So we will see where they are at soon, and I will be sure to broadcast when I am posting videos because there will be videos.
Yay! I can't wait.
I know that there's another production which I was a part of. Luckily enough, I had a small part in a colleague's version of Carmen. We did
Mm.
a digital one, so I'm not sure when that's coming out, but that should be at some point in the future. And as well, since we're talking about projects coming up, I know Pacific Corral is releasing a lovely version of Poor Wayfaring Stranger. So when that is
Mm.
coming out, I would highly recommend checking that out. It is a gorgeous arrangement.
Mm. Awesome. So it's slowly starting to rev up again.
Yeah, things are really starting to pick up. People are starting to talk about the possibility of in-person rehearsals, and it's all just a matter of being safe and taking it at a reasonable pace as opposed to just jumping back in like we were talking about.
Yeah, we're so fortunate to have the technology that we have to be able to put on operas
Yes, absolutely.
virtually. Maybe I don't know. I think it's definitely we were holding a panel the other day where we talked about the pay curtain having fallen through
Mhm.
this virtual presentation of operas or concerts where people that before did not have access to them
Mhm.
now could watch those. And maybe that's something that we could keep for people to be able to watch more opera, make it more accessible to people.
I love that idea.
So the opera is premiering in, I think, about 2 weeks.
Mhm.
How does it feel? So you were part of it, but you also have only seen pretty much what you did. How does that feel compared to being part of a whole rehearsal process that we did not get to have?
Definitely gives me a little bit of a self-conscious feeling just because I had the opportunity to watch a couple videos that were uploaded beforehand because I was trying to
Mhm.
get the hang of responding to someone without them being there. So for instance, I watched Ayana's video of the
Mhm.
rose, and that gave me such a good feel of, okay, here's how much time you leave. And it's more like a conversation if I time it this way, that sort of thing. So I had the opportunity to view a few people as long as they submitted before me. But I've definitely got that. I had that little bit of feeling of, okay, am I going to be reacting big enough to these other people? Are reactions going to actually tell the story that we want them to? So it's such a big trust moment of, okay, I am doing what I need to do. Everyone else will do what they need to do. It will
Mhm.
be okay.
Yeah, you had to just trust to know what you were doing. I can tell you it all worked perfectly.
Oh,
There were
I'm
some parts
sure.
where, of course, the two videos did not, especially the spoken parts, where sometimes it didn't line up, and I would have to cut parts to make it seamless,
Uh-huh.
kind of. But then when I actually went into the editing, I would have had to edit the whole scene again. And I was like, you know what? You have to cut some losses at this point, and it's okay.
It will all be great. I am 100% certain. I remember you showed me a clip of my and Michael's scene at some point,
Mm-hmm.
and I cannot believe how seamless it was. Out of the entire opera, we could have done our scene in the same room,
Mm-hmm.
just the two of us, but that wouldn't have made sense with everyone else. Watching that, almost would have believed that it was done in the same room.
Hmm.
It was so well edited. You have done such an amazing job. So please allow yourself to be proud. It's going to be awesome.
Thank you for that. That means a lot to me. I I am proud of it. I'm proud of all the work that everyone has put into this. We had a shortened deadline because
Mhm.
suddenly we had to have this done the semester before we were planning to put this on stage.
Mhm.
We had technical difficulties sometimes because we were all just learning how to function in a virtual world. We had incredible statues as green screen stands. I'm very proud, incredibly proud of the whole entire cast and performers, instrumentalists that made this possible. It was a group effort, and everyone just, even though it was such a stressful time and such an unwarranted, crazy time of kind of highs and lows, it all came together, and I'm so excited for everyone to see this. I think it'll be exciting to see how people react to it
Mhm.
and how it is perceived, how people, I hope they will fall in love with The Little Prince and the story. I know when I was editing the last scene, the last desert scene when he leaves, it was very emotional
Mhm.
because I realized that for me, even as the editor at that point, it was the end of the journey with that character. And it
Mhm.
was, I don't know, it was heartbreaking. I was so sad that day. As I was putting the finishing touches, I realized no, this was a beautiful journey to be on with the little prince. And yeah, I hope that an audience will feel that way. How did it feel for you? Maybe I don't know if that was the last scene singing that you sang, or I mean that's also the same for movie actors that they don't necessarily do it in the order of the movie. How is that for you singing the last scene?
Oh, the process was a little bit out of order for me, but I remember because actually what I ended up having to do is I recorded the singing and then I did the video and then I recorded over myself speaking it again.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little bit jumpy in that aspect, but I remember when I was filming it that that last scene, oh man, I teared up a little bit because that is so, and especially having done at least the filming in order and going through each individual scene and interacting with each of the different characters and going through the different realizations that he goes through of this incredible journey that considering how young he's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
it really is a revelation for someone that age to see that first of all that not everyone around them is compatible with
True.
you, but also to find those people who are compatible and to feel like you finally arrived at home when you find these people that you care about.
Mm-hmm.
But getting to that end scene because it's that he is leaving, his spirit is leaving, his body is too heavy to stay or to go with him, but also I can't help but feel like he actually dies. I know that he doesn't, but I'm upset.
I know. I'm expecting some maybe backlash of that because technically he does die for what it means to us. That's what you do, and then you hope that there's some other place that they go to.
Mhm.
I know I know that I have a tendency to like sad things. I've always had that. And when I was working on the inspiration for the story actually came to me when I was working in France on a river cruise
Mhm.
where the author was born. So there was this tiny statue of it. But I would read these things. Well, I read the chapter of The Little Prince and introduced it, and then my boss heard from guests that they were so impressed that they wanted me to read again. So I created a similar presentation for every port that we ended up in. But in Arles, I talked about Van Gogh, but for him, I couldn't find anything written, of course, because he's a painter. So I found a poet that had taken the picture Sorrow and written 3 poems about it.
Mhm.
Well, Sorrow. I read a poem which I later on said as a choir piece, I Miss You. And I read this and another poem, I forget which one, but the audience members came to me afterwards, the guests, and were like, this was so beautiful and so heartbreaking. I don't even know how I can go about my day now because this was early in the morning. And then the next tour was in Amsterdam, so I read from Anne Frank's diary.
Mhm.
And they were giving me compliments of because I love acting. So they were like, it was like Anne Frank was standing there reading from my diary, but how can I go about my day after this? And I was like, so with the opera, I kind of had that realization. I did the same thing again because it's the chronological journey, but then hopefully the moral of the story when the choir comes back in and explains, okay, well, but this is what we learned. And hopefully you can imagine that the little prince is up in the stars somewhere and laughing. So, was
I think pieces like that are healthy for us because I love the same kind of thing. I love those pieces that make you sad and feel a little bit heavy sometimes because it makes you think about things that you wouldn't necessarily think about.
mhm,
So having these ideas of where do I fit in? Are these people around me really who I want to be around me? I think that it's healthy to have days where you think about that sort of thing because otherwise we end up getting caught up in that status quo again and we never try to improve upon what we already have.
very true. I always felt like when I was studying theater arts, acting, that I liked the dramatic scenes because to me, I felt like it was more powerful if you can make someone cry.
Mhm.
You can make someone laugh, but a laugh is just the split second and then it's forgotten. But if you make someone cry, you touch them on a level that stays with them, at least for a little while. But yeah, like you said, and maybe it's a little uncomfortable to go there, but it's important to not be part of just the status quo that just swims without ever thinking about why they're swimming or what it means to be alive. Or I think there is humor in this too. There is the scenes, with the eccentric vain man or just the ridiculousness of the grown-ups that the little prince meets. Do you have any character that you liked interacting with or anything like that?
Kind of hard to pick a favorite. I would say, actually, out of everyone, I most enjoyed the Rose
Mm.
because she was so dramatic. And as much as I try to avoid drama in my real life, dang, it's a lot of fun in opera. So it was a lot of fun to interact with the Rose being a drama queen and just trying to call her out and be like, okay, hold on a moment, sweetie. You just got here. Exactly. Yeah, and the the mask that we all put on for different occasions.
Mm.
So that was definitely my favorite character to interact with. I guess maybe not so hard to pick a favorite, but it I will admit it gave me a little bit of emotional whiplash going
Mm.
from one scene to the next scene to the next scene and having each individual character be a totally different experience.
Interesting.
So not in a bad way. It was a little bit of a challenge having to repurpose my brain every few minutes when I was filming a different scene.
That's a very deep realization because it kind of speaks to what we talked about in the very beginning how the little prince, it's almost like he's looking how to be.
Hmm.
He's not secure in himself. He is and he isn't,
Hmm.
because he's so adaptable. He adapts to whatever he finds. He wants to fit in and find that companionship, but he doesn't find it in those characters because they're so vastly different from who he is and what he believes. That's interesting that you felt that on a personal level playing him. And I think that totally translates on screen because you can see my one of my favorite scenes I think is the Rose Garden reprise when the little prince says, "No, she is my Rose. You're nothing like my Rose." When he goes back and has that realization, no,
Hmm.
you are nothing like my Rose because you have not been tamed. You have not been watered. I have watered this rose. She is my Rose.
Hmm.
Yes, she may not be the only rose in the world, but she is my Rose. It's hard to say there is a favorite, but I think that's one of the strongest scenes that I see as very meaningful in the arc of the story.
Oh, I would certainly agree. And actually, even the scene previous where the little prince realizes that there are other roses out there and comes to terms with the fact that his may not be special and it may not be one of a kind is shaking.
Mhm. The scene where the little prince finds out that there are other roses
Mhm.
is what I always thought to be the climax. That was what I was working towards. That's the loudest scene
Right.
because it is that shock factor that you mentioned where it's shattering. It's shattering his world. Yeah, he's coming across all those different characters and he's realizing, okay, the world is not as he envisioned it. He left maybe thinking naively he would find everything is colorful and happy. And he finds grown-ups that have problems. And it's not just all happiness. But then he finds the rose garden, and I think that's the moment where everything that he knew to be true is suddenly turned upside down.
Hmm.
And I think maybe the powerful part of the Rose Garden reprise then is that similar aspects of the music come back, but gentler, because he has come to terms with it and he has learned. He has grown so much in the trajectory of the story. He has come to learn that no, it's okay that there are other roses. Yes, she said that there wasn't, but no, she is my rose after all.
Absolutely.
It is definitely a journey that an audience will go on, hopefully.
I think you have done a wonderful job of portraying the emotion in the music itself. I will say, actually, one of my favorite parts of the opera itself were the parts that I wasn't even in.
Mm,
I loved the chorus work and the
thank you.
layering within it, and the especially the way that you used it in the echoes.
Mm,
Oh my goodness. Um, this is really an emotional journey, and I am speaking from a completely biased standpoint because I went through it with you as the little prince and just getting to know him as a character and feel his hurt and the realizations and coming to terms with the fact that he left behind the one person that he cared about and trying to get back to her. So I am completely biased here, but I hope that everyone enjoys it as much as I did.
Mm. Well, thank you so much. This was lovely. Thank you for your time and for, again, for being the little prince. It was such an honor to get to work with you. I'm sad that we didn't get to work in person, as was the plan.
Next
But
time.
yes, exactly. And still so grateful for what we ended up creating together. I'm really grateful to you, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina. I cannot tell you how honored I am that you asked me in the first place and that I got to help you premiere this work, which obviously means so much to you. So, this has been a whole lot of fun for me, and I really do hope that we get to do this in person in the future. That would be a whole new adventure.
Yes, I hope so too. That's a plan for whenever this time is over.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I will drink tea to that.
Drink to that.